The power died at 9:43 p.m. Right after Stella told me she had never once wondered what it might be like to kiss me, which would have been easier to accept if she hadn't spent the last 40 minutes slowly migrating across the couch until her shoulder was tucked against mine, if her hand wasn't resting on the cushion exactly 1 inch from my knee, and if the way she looked at me when she said it hadn't been the precise expression of someone who had thought about something a very great deal. My name is Beckett Hale. I was 31, a civil engineer from Portland, and I had built a specific and careful life around not reaching for things I might lose. After my brother Milo died 3 years ago, I got good at maintenance, at keeping things level and structurally sound, at not leaning too far over the edge. And then there was Stella. Stella Marsh was 29. She was a wildlife photographer who drove a beat-up Subaru with a National Forest sticker on the rear window and kept a field journal full of pencil sketches of birds she'd spotted at 5 in the morning. We had been best friends for 6 years, which started in the back corner of a mutual friend's housewarming party, over an argument about whether a hot dog was a sandwich. She had said yes, emphatically, with the confidence of someone who had clearly thought about this. I had said the question was beneath us both. We'd been inseparable ever since. She had dark red hair she usually kept in a braid when she was working, brown eyes, and a laugh that came out loud and startled her every time, like it surprised her more than it surprised anyone else. She also noticed things. That was the dangerous part. Not just her subjects through a lens, she noticed people. She noticed the specific way I went quiet when I was exhausted versus the way I went quiet when I was thinking. She noticed what was pretending to be fine. She had been noticing those things for 6 years, and it had never stopped being terrifying. We were not supposed to be alone in that house. It was supposed to be 4 of us, me, Stella, and 2 friends named Todd and Wendy, who had organized the whole trip out to a rental property on the Oregon coast the last weekend of October. 3 days, 1 long stretch of Pacific Beach, and enough planned activities to keep things comfortable and loud. Todd was bringing his cast iron skillet. Wendy had printed a 4-page agenda. There was supposed to be a bonfire. Then Todd's car needed a transmission repair that couldn't wait. Wendy's mother had a fall at her place in Eugene. By Friday afternoon, both of them were sending apology texts, while Stella and I were already an hour outside of Portland, with her camera gear loaded in my truck. She had looked at me from the passenger seat. We could still go. I looked at the highway stretching out through dark pine. We probably shouldn't. The deposit's non-refundable. That's a terrible reason. It's a legitimate one. The house is paid for. The trail is out there. I have my 400mm lens. She held up her coffee cup, and this is from Juniper Street, which means I planned ahead, which means I'm serious. I took a sip from my own cup. She'd gotten my order exactly right, including the extra shot I always forgot to ask for. You ordered mine. You were loading the cooler. You knew I'd say yes. She didn't deny it. The house was out past Lincoln City, down a gravel road through shore pines with a view of the Pacific from the back window. It was dark gray cedar, good bones, and smelled like sea salt and old firewood. The listing had said 3 bedrooms. What the listing had apparently considered flexible was the word bedrooms, because 2 of the 3 were storage rooms with a box spring shoved in the corner and no clearance for a living human being. The 3rd, the real bedroom, had a queen bed with a heavy duvet, weathered wood walls, and a window that faced straight west toward the water. Stella walked in, looked around, and turned to me with the expression of someone who was working hard not to find this funny. Storage. Yup, both of them. That's what I'm seeing. She crossed her arms. I'll take the couch. You won't. The couch is barely a couch, it's more of a statement. I've slept on worse. When? She thought about it. Field assignments. I once slept in the back seat of my car in Montana for 2 nights during a wolf study. You had a sleeping bag and an adrenaline rush. That's not the same. She looked at me for a long second. You're doing the thing. There's no thing. The quiet sacrifice thing, very noble. Also completely unnecessary. We're adults, Beckett. I picked up my duffel. I'll take the floor. You're almost 6 feet tall. The floor is hardwood and regret. I've slept on worse. When? I had no answer. She smiled, not unkindly, and said, "We'll figure it out," which was what she always said when she had already made a decision, but wanted me to feel like I was still part of it. We made dinner, clam chowder from a can, with crusty sourdough from a bakery in Tillamook we'd stopped at on the drive, which had been Stella's idea, and also the best thing I'd eaten in a month. We ate at the round table near the back window while the ocean turned dark outside and the first edges of the storm that had been in the forecast, all week, rolled in, low off the water. "There goes the bonfire," she said. Todd would have been devastated. Todd brings that skillet everywhere. I think it's his emotional support cookware. He made my sister's birthday dinner in it last year. I remember. He was so proud, she pulled a piece of bread apart. "How's Claudia doing?" "Good. She texts me every Sunday now." Stella's expression softened. She didn't say anything, but the softness said, "Because of Milo. Because Sunday was the day he died, and my family had quietly reorganized itself around that fact without ever saying so out loud." "She doesn't have to do that," I said. "She knows. She does it anyway." "Yeah. That's what people do." I looked out at the water. The sky had gone the color of old bruising. Rain was starting to streak the glass. Stella kicked my foot under the table, light and easy. "Tell me something good." "The chowder." "Solid. What else?" I looked at her. She was still in her flannel from the drive, hair coming loose from its braid, and there was a small fleck of sea salt on her sleeve from where she'd leaned against the pier railing 2 hours earlier. I had noticed it before dinner and almost said something, and then didn't. "This," I said. "I don't know, this." She didn't look away. "Yeah," she said, quieter, "this too." The power went out 3 hours later. No crack of lightning, no dramatic final surge, just the lights and then nothing. The refrigerator stopped humming. The small lamp in the corner went dark. We sat in sudden quiet. Then Stella said, "Well, that's atmospheric." I was already in the kitchen, where I'd noticed a drawer of candles during dinner. She found the matches. We got 4 lit and arranged them on the coffee table on the kitchen counter, which was enough light to see each other by, but not much past that. Outside, the storm had gotten serious. Rain came sideways against the windows, and the pines around the house were moving in ways I tried not to look at too closely. We settled on the couch with a blanket and her phone playing low acoustic guitar from the 1 bar of signal we were managing to hold. That was when she said it. She had gone quiet for a few minutes. Not uncomfortable, just the easy kind of quiet we'd always been able to carry together. I had leaned back. She had folded her feet under her and pulled her side of the blanket up. "Have you ever thought about us?" she said. I kept my eyes on the candle. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean." I did. I also was not ready to say so, with the lights out and the storm against the windows, and her shoulder, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her through my sleeve. "Stella." "That's not an answer. It's your name." "I know my own name, Beckett." I looked at her then. Her chin was up slightly, the way it always went when she had decided to be brave about something, and wasn't going to back down. Her hands were wrapped around a mug of tea she'd made before the power went. "Why are you asking?" I said. "Because I want to know. You photograph wolves for a living. You're not afraid of anything." "I photograph wolves because I'm not afraid of them," she paused. "Are you afraid of me?" That landed somewhere specific. I looked back at the candle. "No," I said. "I'm afraid of what happens if I lose you." She was quiet a moment. "That's not the same thing." "I know." She looked down at her mug, and I thought we would let it go. The way we'd let things go before, with a subject change, with humor, with the mutual unspoken agreement to leave the tension right where it sat. Then her phone buzzed on the cushion between us. She picked it up. The screen lit briefly, just long enough for me to catch the notification preview without meaning to. It was from someone saved as Bex. The message read, "Did you show him the folder yet, or are you still pretending this whole trip is about wildlife?" Stella's breath caught. She set the phone face down in her lap. The room held very still, except for the rain. "What folder?" I said. She closed her eyes. Her camera was sitting on the table where she'd set it after dinner, a big, mirrorless body she carried everywhere. I was not the kind of person who touched someone else's gear without asking. Stella knew that. She'd left it sitting there for 3 hours without a second thought, because she trusted me completely. Stella, my voice came out gentle. What's in the folder? She looked at the camera, then at me, and something in her face shifted, less composed, and more honest than I'd ever seen her with me directly. I have a folder on my camera, she said. On my hard drive at home too. Over the last 4 years, when you weren't paying attention, when you didn't know I was shooting, I've taken a lot of pictures of you. The candle nearest us flickered. How many is a lot? I said. She pressed her lips together. Maybe don't ask me that right now. Stella. It's a lot, Beckett. I reached over and picked up the camera. She didn't stop me. I turned it on, pulled up the gallery, and found a folder with my name on it. There were hundreds of photographs. Me on the porch at Todd's place in July, talking with my hands the way I do when I've had one beer and I'm actually relaxed. Me at the farmer's market she dragged me to last April, holding a bunch of dahlias I'd impulsively bought because the color was good. Me on the tailgate of my truck after a hike through the gorge, eyes closed, face turned up toward afternoon sun. Me laughing at something I couldn't even place the memory of, head back, caught entirely off guard, in a moment I hadn't known was being witnessed. She had photographed me the way she photographed everything she was afraid of losing. I set the camera down carefully. How long? I said. She was looking at her hands. 4 years. Stella. I know. I know, okay? I know how it looks. She looked up, and her eyes were bright with the specific effort of not showing more than she'd decided to show. I photograph what matters to me. That's how I've always worked. And you have been the thing that matters most for a long time, and I didn't know what to do with that except keep it. The rain hammered the windows. I said, the night Milo died. She went completely still. You sat with me at the hospital for 5 hours, I said. I didn't ask you to come. I don't even know how you found out. I called Claudia, I think, and she must have called you. But you showed up and sat next to me in those plastic waiting room chairs and you didn't say anything. For most of it, you just stayed there. And somewhere around midnight, you put your hand on my arm. She was watching me very carefully. I didn't tell you this, I said. The timing was obviously not the moment for it. But that was the night I couldn't pretend anymore. Not like the feeling was new. It wasn't new. But it was the night I couldn't call it anything else. And I thought, I can't say this. Not here, not now. And if I say it and she doesn't feel it, I won't just lose something. I'll lose the only person still holding me up. She didn't speak. So I didn't, I said. And then time kept going, and there were other moments where I almost did, and eventually I think I just got used to carrying the weight of it. The storm moved against the house. 3 years, she said, very quietly. About that. You've been carrying this for 3 years. Yeah. She exhaled slowly, set her mug on the table, turned to face me on the couch. That is genuinely the most frustrating thing you've ever told me. I almost laughed. I know. Beckett. I know. She reached over and put her hand over mine where it rested on my knee. Just set it there, deliberate, and waited. Neither of us moved for a moment. I'm not something you keep yourself away from to protect me, she said. I'm not fragile and I'm not going anywhere. And I have been extremely patient about us having 600 almost conversations and then pretending the room temperature is fine. The room temperature really is pretty bad right now. The power is out. I know. Beckett. I turned my hand over under hers, laced our fingers together, slowly, the way you do something, when you want to remember getting it right. Her breath shifted. Is this okay? I said. That's the understatement of the year. Then, yes. I looked at our hands. Her thumb moved once across my knuckle, and the room reorganized itself around that small motion. I've thought about kissing you, I said. So many times I'm embarrassed to give you a number. She went very still. In the truck today on the drive up. At the farmer's market in April. At the hospital. which I know was the worst possible timing, and I pushed it down as hard as I could. At Todd's 4th of July party 2 summers ago, standing in the rain outside that theater in December because neither of us could get a ride home, approximately once a week for 3 years. She looked at me like I was reading something back to her that she had written herself in private and had started to wonder if she'd imagined. Then she shifted across the couch and kissed me. Not tentative. Stella had never been tentative about anything she'd decided on. One hand came up to my face, and her mouth found mine in the candlelight, and for one suspended second I was so unprepared for it actually happening that I forgot to respond. Then I did. I pulled her closer, one arm around her, the other coming up to her shoulder, and kissed her back with everything I'd been holding onto for 3 years. She made a sound against my mouth that I was entirely sure I wouldn't be recovering from. When we stopped, she pressed her forehead against mine. "Hi," she said. "Hi. 3 years, Beckett. I know. Don't make me wait 3 more for the next one." I kissed her again, shorter this time, but no less certain. She smiled against my mouth and I felt it in my chest. We slept in the one bed because there was no reasonable alternative, and because by midnight, neither of us was pretending we needed one. She curled against my side with her hand over my ribs, and I lay there in the dark while the storm eased off outside and felt something in me that had been load-bearing for years finally set itself down. Morning came in gray and salt-washed. Stella was still asleep when I woke, her hair loose, her face turned toward the window. I watched her longer than was strictly necessary and then got up to find coffee. She appeared in the kitchen 20 minutes later, wearing my flannel shirt. She had located it in my bag at some point, with her hair in a knot on top of her head, and she said, "Please tell me there's coffee." There's coffee. She took the mug I handed her and leaned against the counter and looked at me with soft morning eyes that held no trace of regret and a significant amount of calm, and I thought, there it is. That's the thing I was afraid to lose. And somehow I'd gotten to keep it anyway. "You okay?" she said. "Yeah," I turned toward her. "I'm really okay." She smiled over the rim of her mug. We drove back to Portland with her hand on the console and mine over hers, the coast pulling away behind us and the city coming back into focus ahead. Her phone reconnected somewhere past Tillamook and the messages arrived. Todd wanting a debrief, Wendy asking if the house was everything they'd hoped, Bex with a string of escalating question marks that made Stella laugh out loud. My phone had a text from Claudia. "Mom said you went up to the coast. Hope it was good." And below it, a pause, and then, Milo would have thought this was hilarious B2E just putting that out there. I read it twice, then I typed back, "It was good, more than good. I'll call you Sunday." I sent it before I could second guess what I was admitting. Stella read over my shoulder. She didn't say anything. She just pressed her shoulder against mine for a moment and left it there. Things were not perfect when we got back to the city. They were better than perfect. They were real. Todd demanded dinner and accepted an edited version of events over tacos, where he spent the whole meal working very hard to look like he'd seen this coming. Wendy cried a little and then denied it. Bex showed up at Stella's apartment with a bottle of Prosecco and a single knowing look that Stella told me later had lasted almost a full minute. 3 weeks in, I missed a dinner because a project deadline shifted, and I didn't call ahead. Stella went quiet over text in the particular way she has that tells me she's deciding off between the real response and the diplomatic one. I sat in my apartment at 9 p.m., staring at my phone, and thought about every time in my life I'd let discomfort pass instead of walking toward it. I drove to her place. She opened the door in pajamas with her field journal in one hand. "I should have called earlier," I said. "I didn't, because I assumed you'd understand, and that's exactly what I don't want to do. Assume you'll absorb things because it's easier for me." She looked at me for a long moment, then she stepped back to let me in. We ate cereal at her kitchen table at 9:30 at night and made a rule. No disappearing. Not into work. Not into grief. Not into the old habit I had of making myself smaller so I'd be less to lose. If something was wrong, we said so. If we needed something, we asked. That was it. Those were the terms. She shook on it like it was a contract. I told her I felt more comfortable with that framing, She said that tracked completely, and she loved me anyway. We hadn't said it yet, not like that. I looked at her over the cereal bowl. Say that again. She blinked, then understood. Her expression settled into something quiet and true. I love you, Beckett. The kitchen was ordinary around us. Dishes in the drying rack, a magnet from Crater Lake on the fridge, her field boots by the door. Nothing cinematic about any of it. I love you too, I said. She nodded once, like that had confirmed something she'd been keeping track of, and went back to her cereal. In April, we went back to the coast. Same house, by planning or coincidence, she wouldn't say. The weather was different. Mild clear, the ocean flat and silver in the late afternoon. No storm, no power out, no forcing function of any kind. We didn't need one. She set her camera up on the back deck to catch the last of the golden hour. And I sat in the wooden chair beside her and watched pelicans riding thermals above the surf and didn't say anything for a long time because there was nothing I needed to say. Eventually, she caught me looking at her. You're doing it again, she said. Staring? Looking. She put her eye back to the viewfinder. There's a difference. What's the difference? She adjusted something without glancing up. Staring is just eyes. Looking is when you're actually seeing. I thought about the folder on her camera. 4 years of photographs taken, when I wasn't paying attention, of a man who hadn't known he was being seen that carefully or that well. I think I've been looking at you for a long time, I said. She lowered the camera. I know, she said. I've been looking back. She turned the camera around and showed me the last frame she'd taken. Not the pelicans, not the water. Just me sitting in that wooden chair, watching the ocean with an expression I couldn't entirely read, but that looked, for the first time in a long time, like someone who wasn't bracing for something. The light went gold, then pink, then the slow, steady blue of evening coming in off the Pacific. And I sat beside her, watching her work, thinking about the specific kind of courage it takes to photograph what you love, to point the lens at the thing you most want to stay, and say, quietly, with no guarantee at all, I see you. I want to keep seeing you. It's a different thing from building structures designed to hold weight. But I was starting to think it might be the most load-bearing thing I'd ever learned to do.